Hello, this is Fish, and I will be submitting my hybrid Durabo, named after the Duramboras from Monster Hunter, for the Great Hybrid Tournament. I'll be going over Durabo's genetic contributors, physical characteristics, combat capabilities, armor, preferred environment, and its personality. If you don't want to watch a super long video, I would skip to physical characteristics and onward. If you have any questions about how I arrived at the hybrid result, refer back to the genetic contributors. So, let's begin. Base of Durabo will be the woolly rhino. This is for a multitude of reasons. Firstly, rhinos are extremely well built due to being able to run at their full size, which requires some of the strongest bones in the animal kingdom, with a compressive strength far exceeding larger animals such as elephants, accompanied by intense musculature. Rhinos also have thick reinforced skin with a significant amount of blood vessels on the surface. The woolly rhino most importantly possesses two horns, which implies they used them heavily for interspecies combat. Modern species with two horns use the second horn for protection of the face when fighting, and it is one of the largest species to have this trait. Larger rhinos lack two horns. We are choosing this species because it means the animal is more built than larger species such as Elasmotherium that have a lack of necessity for an overly built body. Now, the first animal that will be added is the black wildebeest. The added traits can be summed up as horns and endurance. The horns act as a defense against smaller animals that could potentially jump on Durabo's head, and pierce the brain through the eye sockets, as this is one of the only remaining undefended areas of the animal. The horns also serve to gore any animal that manages to get on the head or neck, and serve a thermal regulatory purpose, as all bovines have blood vessels in their horns that assist in thermogulation. Now for the endurance aspect, black wildebeest have high oxidative and high glycolytic capacity muscle fibers, meaning that their muscles rely much more on oxygen and significantly outperform normal muscles in endurance. This also applies to their fast twitch fibers, which normally quickly start anaerobic respiration and produce lactic acid, tiring the animal. Like camels, wildebeest have arteries connected to their nose and brain that selectively cool the brain, allowing the internal body temperature to rise higher than the brain, reducing the effects of overheating. In addition, the size of the lungs, and heart, and blood volume of wildebeest are higher than those of most animals, similar to pronghorns, which contribute greatly to endurance and power. Finally, I will also take the wildebeest's eyesight. To be perfectly honest, it's not the best, but they are prey eyes and good at detecting movement on a flat plane, and way better than a rhino's eyesight. Next up is our first pre-Cenozoic species, the Stegosaurus. You could say that I am a basic female dog for this. However, Stegosaurus is the best option for my purposes out of the family. The first thing I will be taking is the basic tail structure. The main thing of note here is that a Stegosaurus has bifurcated caudal vertebrae, which, as far as I know, is unique to the Stegosaurus. I want this in particular due to the better muscular attachment bifurcation allows. It is seen very rarely in animals, notably in sauropods, necks, and a type of cattle, but those are not in the caudal vertebrae. I will be also modifying the forelimb and shoulder area in favor of a more dinosaur-like structure with an unfused large coracoid and a more restricted scapula. This does make Durabo very slow, and reduces forelimb mobility, though rhinos already did not have significant forelimb mobility, and in turn, this massively increases the strength and stability of the forelimbs. Then, I am implementing the dermal plates, and the second pair of thagomizers. The dermal plates are actually highly modified osteoderms. They are added for two reasons, the first being it's cool. The second is there is a fair amount of consensus that they had some form of blood vessels, meaning they can serve the function of thermogulation, like massive radiators, though later this can be modified further. Now, only using one pair of thagomizers is due to later contributors down the line, but just keep in mind that there are only 2 spikes rather than 4. The final trait taken from the stegosaur is extremely slight brain modifications. primarily in the hypothalamic attack area, to allow for the use of the tail in combat, rather than a more rhino-like approach. For the second, and final pre-Cenozoic species, the Ankylosaurus, which again is pretty basic, but has been chosen over other ankylosaurs due to the structure of the tail. Specifically the knob and handle of the club. For Durabo I will first add the handle. It is made up of the last 7 caudal vertebrae that lock together with interlocking articular processes, and neural spines, allowing the tail to take high levels of force without damage. The Ankylosaurus specifically had a particularly thick handle, which would be more effective for higher forces. The knob of the club is also being used to increase the weight of the tip of the tail, increasing the power involved. This combines with the Stegosaurus fusing the knob's large osteoderms and the 2 retained thagomisers, making something resembling a double-sided war pick. The second contribution of the Ankylosaurus is an increase to the width of the ilium of the hip, increasing hind limb stability and muscular strength. Finally, I will be also using Ankylosaurus to change the reproductive organs into a cloaca. Normally, I would rather not note this down, but many canids target this area on male mammals, which Durabo is. Anyways, going back to Cenozoic species, I am adding Panochthus, part of the Glyptodont family, that are related to armadillos and sloths. This branch of mammals generally has many traits that are useful for a wide range of hybrids, but Durabo will be starting out taking hip anatomy with a fission of the sacral vertebrae and pelvis, an increase in the height and depth of the ilium, ischium, and pubis, and an increase in the height of sacral spines. This greatly increases the hind limb's strength, as well as acting as a strong anchor for the tail and tail muscles. Next, the limbs will be thickened, making the limbs heavier, reducing speed, but increasing load-bearing capacity and durability. Like ground sloths, Glyptodonts also have large heel bones that they can use in some cases to rear up, and Durabo's tail moves the center mass far enough back where this is an option. Then, the olecranon and infraspinous fossa will also be increased, making the forelimbs stronger. The forelimb length will also be reduced, bringing the front end of Durabo closer to the ground, making it harder to push over, and giving the horns a better angle to pierce large animals from the underside. Finally, I will be adding the caudal tube. This species was one of the few Glyptodonts with a tail club, similar in appearance to ankylosaurs, but they stiffened their club's handles through a ridged tube formed by osteoderms. This will be combined with the interlocking caudal vertebrae, to further increase the amount of force the tail can withstand without damage. Now, for an animal I assume basically no one is familiar with, Dirasaurus maghrebensis. This is a crocodilomorph that managed to make it to 47 million years ago, and had a lifestyle fairly similar to modern crocodiles, though they were more suited to swimming, and potentially lived in marine environments. All that said, I want this species for 2 things. The first being the massive hemal and neural spine arches of the caudal vertebrae, that massively increase the tail's strength. The second trait pairs back with the stegosaur's dermal plates. Like modern crocodilians, Dirasaurus likely had highly vascularized osteoderms to be used in thermal regulation, and, as already established, stegosaur plates are highly modified osteoderms. Paraceratherium is likely an animal everyone here is familiar with. If not, it is also known as the hornless rhino, and a contender for the largest terrestrial mammal. The first thing taken is just a size increase. I actually am not going to increase the size to the maximum weight of the Paraceratherium though, for one reason: if I did, then the added weight of the tail and armor from later on would make it over the weight limit. I will specify the final weight later in the stats section, and the animal's dimensions to take the tail and armor's weight into account. This species also contributes to the leg structure of Durabo, mainly making them more columnar, increasing how much weight Durabo can hold up, with less strain on the muscles. Next to be added is a large amount of scapular cartilage, increasing muscular attachments. After that, feet pads will be added. Yes, like elephants' parasaurolotheriums had feet pads. It is a very common trait. Then most importantly, the hind limb length is increased to double the length of the forelimbs, to the same ratio stegosaurs had. Then, I increased the nose size to increase the effectiveness of the cooling mechanism of the wildebeest. And finally, I am actually reducing the length of the first horn of Durabo, so that it does not need to be nearly as long, and the reduced weight can increase the speed at which the horn is stabbed. Now time for a speed round. 3, 2, 1, let's go. Hero Shrew. This is being used for interlocking thoracic and lumbar vertebrae to increase load bearing at the cost of flexibility. Rhinos already barely had that, so no problem. Chinese pangolin. Like lizards, pangolins grow scales in their epidermis. The scales are composed of keratin of varying hardnesses, making it composite overlapping armor, doing nothing to flexibility. Though pangolin armor is massively heavy, at roughly 25% of an animal's body mass, Durabo is built to carry that kind of weight comfortably. Common carp. So, Durabo uses fish scales as a form of armor. Fish scales grow in the dermis, so inside the skin rather than over it. Like osteoderms, all fish scales share homology with each other. The main issue with working with them is figuring out the order in which materials are layered. Anyways, I will be taking the carp scales as a base. Specifically the scale shape, and collagen mineralization patterns. Longhorn cowfish is next, providing thickening to the collagen and bone layer of the scale, and the collagen microstructure of the scale. To add in the dentin layer of the scale, the graybicker is used. Fish scales are layered with collagen, bone, dentin, and enamel, though many species have lost most of these layers. Usually the dentin and enamel. Steephead parrotfish have high concentrations of fluorapatite in their enameloid, which is not enamel, but in fact a type of dentin. This is one of the strongest biomaterials recorded, and I will implement this into the dentin layer of the fish scale. Then the alligator gar is added for a thick enamel layer in the scale. Graybicker do have enamel in their scales as well, but the layer is not as thick as the gar, and gar lack a dentin layer. Finally, the last animal, the humble North American beaver, added for a ferrite-like material mixed into the enamel layer of the scales. A rodent was chosen over a shrew or Komodo dragon because all of which use slightly different materials with different mechanical properties. Komodo dragon iron deposits also don't actually mix into the enamel. They coat it, which I could have used if I had more gene space. Additionally, the beaver is used to increase Durabo's forelimb musculature. So, Durabo weighs 49,499 pounds, or 22,452.37 kilograms. It stands at 8.5 feet, or 2.59 meters at the shoulder, and is approximately 38 feet, or 11.58 meters in length. The art is done, courtesy of my friend, Pain.D1H from Discord. Amazing artist. Combat capabilities. For speed, Durabo was never made to go fast, and is on a similar level to sauropods, being able to walk, at roughly 8 to 10 miles per hour, speed walk, at somewhere around 12 to 14 miles per hour. And at peak, it could probably hit up to 18 miles per hour. This is mainly due to the forelimb lengths and massive weight. That said, a full-speed ram could deliver upwards of 1.8 to 3 meganewtons of force. The tail club likely weighs in the ballpark of 66 pounds or about 30 kilograms. The tail can be swung at up to 25 meters per second, or 66 miles per hour, delivering 3,370 pounds of force from a standstill. It is also very important to note that the force of a strike from the tail is concentrated onto one point. A 5-foot bone spike. Additionally, Durabo has the ability to rear up on 2 feet, and to kick animals with its hind legs. Now for armor, I have spent weeks trying to perfect fish scales, and honestly, this is not their maximum power. I need more contributors to achieve max power. Firstly, I will say that this hybrid's armor is extremely heavy, contributing up to 30% of its mass. This is on the lower end of ankylosaurs, turtles, and glypodonts, and most of this weight comes from the pangolin scales. I can already hear people bringing up, fish scales need to be moist. More specifically, it's their skin. Like amphibians with many pores and mucous glands, it does not retain water well. This is solved by rhino skin, which is significantly thicker than fish skin, without many pores on the surface, and are thick enough to allow the scales to be completely buried inside the dermis, and due to rhino skin's high concentration of blood vessels near the surface, the scales should get plenty of nutrients, and stay moist. Side note, An alligator gar and arapaima scales only contribute roughly 1 to 5% of their body mass, and this scale structure I have devised is roughly 20% heavier, mainly due to most of the increase in thickness being collagen. Now for numbers. The pangolin's scales cap out at roughly 20 inches wide, 27 inches long, and 2 inches thick. The fish scales are roughly 1.6 inches thick. Unfortunately, I don't have the specific sizes of each fish scale, but they are shaped like those of a common carp. This is all on top of a rhino's skin, a bit over 4 inches thick, though most of that space is taken up by the fish scales. The skin itself acts as a shock absorber reinforced with dense collagen. Despite all the layering of defenses, this has little to no impact on the animal's flexibility due to how the scales are shingled. For a visualization of how strong this armor is, if Durabo fought against another version of itself, it would most likely not be able to do significant damage. Only being able to damage the upper layer of pangolin scales, the force would be absorbed to the point the horn would be blunted, and sustain damage when it gets to the fish scale layer, most likely not being able to fully penetrate. Despite the whole armor layer only being 6 inches thick, the scales transfer force to their neighbors, reducing pressure, and have specialized layers to break teeth and bone. Having 2 layers of armor of this nature on top of each other, magnify their effect. Due to Durabo's low-to-the-ground posture and weight, it is extremely difficult to push over. The hind limbs being twice the length of the forelimbs magnify this. The arrangement might be bad for speed, but is extremely good for pivoting and holding ground in a shoving match. The overall body plan also ensures that there are no blind spots. Where it cannot fight back, the lower body is covered by the legs, the front with horns, the sides and rear with the tail, and the eyes by the wildebeest horns. Like most animals, though, the underbelly is the most vulnerable, lacking pangolin scales. However, the fish scales are still present. Unfortunately, I was not able to prepare for venom. It takes far too many contributors to fully cover my bases, though due to the fight lasting only an hour, and at this size Durabo shouldn't encounter significant issue with venom, as it needs to be delivered in the first place to be effective. So, we were asked to provide an environment to fight in, and to be perfectly honest, as long as the environment is fairly open, flat, and with stable ground, between 10 and 40 degrees Celsius, Durabo should be fine. Though, if I had to pick, how about a nice flower meadow with a temperate climate, something like the American prairies? Durabo is actually one of my few hybrids I made that doesn't hate everyone and everything on a genetic level, because I ran out of genome slots, so he's actually fairly chill, though if you move the wrong way, he could pop your head like a balloon with a tail swipe. He enjoys eating fruits, particularly pineapple and watermelon, but also sweet potatoes. He also likes getting his scales washed and sitting out in the sun. Anyways, I think that's it for Durabo. My Discord is CultLeaderFish, and if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. I'll do my best to answer them. Have a great day.